I was in the conference room, presenting my quarterly report. My phone, sitting on the table, started buzzing incessantly. I signaled my assistant to take it out of the room, determined to finish my presentation. As soon as I wrapped up, I rushed out to check my phone. Just as I suspected, it was my wife, Mary. 7 missed calls and countless WhatsApp messages, all with exclamation marks, like urgent alarms making me feel suffocated. I found a quiet corner in the office and called her back. Surprisingly, she didn't start yelling. Her voice sounded tired. "What are you doing? I've already handled everything. I can't rely on you for anything." Ignoring her sarcasm, I asked what had happened. She sighed in frustration. "What else could it be? It's Joey. That kid is getting more and more out of hand. During gym class, he lifted a girl's skirt. You have no idea how harshly the teacher scolded me. I've never been so humiliated in my life. Next time Joey causes trouble, you deal with it. I can't take this anymore." I hesitated for a moment, but decided to bring up an old topic. "I've told you before, Joey should be handled by your parents. As his sister, you can't discipline him properly. We should focus on Alice. After all, she's my daughter." Mary's voice suddenly sharpened, cutting me off. "For the last time, Joey is my brother, my own flesh and blood. You, as an outsider, should keep your opinions to yourself." The word outsider hit me like a needle to the heart, snapping me back to reality. I wisely kept my mouth shut. After we got married, I moved in with Mary, bringing my daughter Alice with me. Although Mary and I got along well, she was always cold towards Alice. For the sake of family harmony, I had to endure it silently. My silence bored Mary, and she didn't say much more, just reminded me to come home early to help with the household chores. That's Mary for you, calling me an outsider one moment and asking for my help the next. I sighed, packed up my things, and headed to the parking lot. The drive home took over an hour, and I sped the whole way. But when I opened the door, I was greeted by an unexpectedly peaceful scene. Joey was in the living room, engrossed in his video game. Mary's mom was in the kitchen, slicing fruit, while her dad was belting out country music into a microphone. From the bedroom near the kitchen, I could hear Mary scolding Alice. "This is my home, or more accurately, Mary's dad's home. I'm just a long-term guest here." When Alice and I moved in, Mary assigned her a small room near the kitchen as her bedroom. I wasn't happy about it, but Mary said it was either that or sharing a room with Joey. I figured Alice needed her own space, so I reluctantly agreed. This household includes Mary's parents, her brother Joey, my daughter Alice, and me. So, when Mary called me an outsider, she wasn't entirely wrong. Everyone else here is family by blood. I rolled up my sleeves, ready to help with dinner, and noticed the messy dining table. "Oh, you guys have already eaten," I mumbled. Mary's mom, the closest to me, heard my comment and looked up with disdain. "Joey came home hungry right after school. We couldn't wait for you to cook, so Mary's dad made dinner." She craned her neck to look at the table. "It's been a while since he cooked, so he might have made a bit less. There's some left. You can have it. If that's not enough, there's instant pasta. No point in cooking a whole meal just for one person." I forced a smile. "Got it. You go ahead." My growling stomach suddenly didn't feel so hungry. I rolled up my sleeves and cleaned up the messy table, then turned on the water to start washing the dishes. Mary must have heard the water running because she came out of the bedroom, munching on an apple. I was still thinking about Joey's behavior and turned to her. "Did you tell your parents about what happened at school? This needs to be addressed seriously. It's not a small matter. He's too young to be lifting girls' skirts. That's sexual harassment. If we don't discipline him now, it could lead to bigger problems." Mary rolled her eyes at me, clearly annoyed. I knew she thought I was making a big deal out of nothing, but I felt it needed to be said. "And tell your mom to be careful about what she watches on TV. Those romantic scenes can be too much, even for adults. Kids can easily imitate what they see. And limit his screen time. The internet is full of bad influences. I bet he learned that skirt-lifting nonsense online." Mary snapped, throwing the apple core into the trash with force. "Enough already. Joey said he won't do it again. What more do you want?" Her raised voice drew everyone's attention in the living room. First, Mary's mom shot me a disapproving look. Then, her dad walked over to Joey, ruffling his hair. "It's no big deal. Schools these days overreact. He's just a kid. He didn't mean any harm. It's just curiosity." He seemed to realize he should give me some support and added, "Tell your brother-in-law you won't do it again, Joey. Understand? When you're older, no one will care." This half-hearted comment left me speechless. I shook my head and knocked on Alice's bedroom door. In the bedroom, Alice was drawing. I stood beside her for a while, noticing she had already finished one picture and was working on another similar one. "Did your teacher ask you to draw 2 pictures?" I asked. "No, Dad. This one is for Joey. I finished mine a long time ago." I nodded, patting Alice gently on the head. I sat on the bed, watching her continue to draw. Her innocent and focused face under the light brought me a sense of comfort. I exhaled softly, reminding myself to mind my own business. As long as Alice was healthy and safe, that was all that mattered. The next day was the weekend. I wanted Alice to sleep in, so I quietly got up and went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast for the family. Checking the time, I decided to wake Mary and Joey. Last night, Joey insisted on sleeping with his sister, so I had to give up my spot. I opened Mary's bedroom door and found only her in bed. Joey's spot was empty. Just as I was wondering where he was, I heard a scream from Alice's room. Thinking she had a nightmare, I rushed to her room, only to witness a scene more horrifying than any nightmare. Joey was half kneeling on the bed, one hand pressing down on Alice's stomach, the other pulling at her nightgown. Alice was flailing in fear, and Joey was angrily spitting on her face, telling her to stay still. My head exploded with rage. I lunged at Joey, grabbing him by the neck and yanking him up like a rag doll. I slapped him hard across the face several times and then kicked him towards the door. He crashed to the floor with a thud, stunned for a moment before bursting into tears. At the same time, I heard the bedroom door open. Mary's parents rushed over, alarmed. Ignoring them, I quickly dressed Alice and held her close, comforting her while glaring coldly at the doorway. Mary's parents were frantically checking Joey for injuries. Mary, in her nightgown, came running over, asking, "What's going on? What's happening?" Joey, between sobs, pointed at me and stammered, He hit me and kicked me. It hurts so much. You have to punish him." Mary's dad, hearing this, was furious. He rolled up his sleeves and charged at me. I calmly placed Alice on the other side of the bed and stood up. As Mary's dad lunged, I sidestepped, causing him to crash into the wooden coat rack at the foot of the bed, hitting his chin. The pain brought tears to his eyes. He wiped his face and, in a dramatic gesture, sat down, slapping his thighs and wailing, "He hit me. My son-in-law hit me." Mary's mom, shaking with anger, said, "How could you, a grown man, hit a child so hard? Look at his face. What did he do that was so terrible? You owe me an explanation, or I won't let this go." Mary, equally furious, stormed over. "How dare you lay a hand on my family? Have you lost your mind?" I sneered and pointed at Joey, who was still rolling on the floor. "Ask him what he did." Joey ignored me, continuing to cry and demand that they punish me. I let out a snort and turned to Mary's family. "If he won't say it, I will. He snuck into Alice's bed this morning and tried to pull off her nightgown. If I had been a minute later, who knows what would have happened to my Alice? Is that not terrible enough? Shouldn't I have disciplined him?" I pointed at Mary. "You're Alice's stepmother. Tell me, should I have disciplined him?" Mary, never having seen me so enraged, hesitated, unable to respond. Suddenly, Joey stopped his tantrum and sprang up, launching himself at me. He bit down hard on my arm, growling like a crazy dog. I couldn't shake him off, so I grabbed his neck, forcing him to let go. As we separated, I saw blood on his lips and deep bite marks on my arm. He coughed for a while, glaring at me with a hatred far beyond his years. "This whole house is mine. I can't look at girls at school, and now I can't look at Alice at home? Who do you think you are? You're just a freeloader." The word freeloader stunned everyone in the room. Hearing such a term from a 10-year-old, so fluently, made it clear that this was something he'd heard repeatedly from the adults. I suddenly lost the will to argue. I took several Band-Aids from the drawer and covered the bite marks. Then I walked over to Mary and held out my hand. "Give me back my bank card." Mary looked confused. "Give me the bank card," I repeated, louder this time. Startled, Mary quickly retrieved it from the drawer and handed it to me. "Starting today, Alice and I are moving out. You can stay here if you think Joey needs you more." I pulled a suitcase from under the bed and began packing our things. Mary's mom, who had been sitting on the floor cursing, suddenly sneered. "Feeling independent now, huh? Fine, but pay up the rent for all these years. We're not running a charity here." I paused, a mocking smile on my face. "Sure, if you want to play it that way. But let's also calculate how much you owe me for being your unpaid servant all these years. Cooking 3 meals a day, cleaning, unclogging drains, fixing appliances. If I remember correctly, I've been taking care of Joey since he started kindergarten. Let's tally it all up and make a list. Mary's mom turned pale, and Mary tried to smooth things over. Come on, you're taking this too seriously. My mom was just trying to scare you into staying. I'll talk to her. Joey's just a kid. He doesn't know any better. She tried to put my clothes back into the suitcase, but I stopped her. Mary, I've made myself clear. I've wanted to move out for a long time, but you wouldn't agree. This time, I'm not backing down. Even if today hadn't happened, I still wouldn't want to stay here. Mary's mom snapped, let him go. Let's see how well he does on his own. With the help of a colleague, I found a clean, bright apartment with all the necessary furniture. Most importantly, it was close to Alice's school. I was pleased with the place, and the landlord seemed happy with us as tenants, especially liking Alice. She wore a light purple dress and would squat down to talk to Alice, listening attentively. When I took out my bank card to pay the rent, I realized there was far less money in the account than I had thought. It didn't take much to figure out why. Mary had been secretly using it to support her family. No wonder she always hesitated when I asked if we had enough savings for a down payment on a new house. She never wanted me to buy a house and leave. She wanted to keep me tied to that home. No man would willingly live in his father-in-law's house forever. Mary and I had always talked about working hard for a few years to buy our own place. Back then, Mary was an only child. But then her parents unexpectedly had Joey. They claimed they needed help with the new baby and begged me to stay with them for a while. I couldn't resist the combined persuasion of Mary and her parents, so I moved in, becoming what people back home called a live-in son-in-law. Over the years, the idea of buying a house kept resurfacing in my mind, only to be crushed by reality each time. I never anticipated that in just a few years, the city's housing prices would skyrocket beyond my reach. Living in Mary's parents' house, I was the busiest person there. Cooking, laundry, cleaning, no matter how exhausted I was from work, I had to keep going at home. I even took care of Joey when he was little. That period was the darkest time of my life. Busy at work during the day, and just as busy at home at night. I nearly fell into depression. As Joey grew older and started school, the physical strain lessened, but the financial burden increased. Mary's parents had another property they rented out, which initially provided a comfortable income. But as Joey grew, their income became insufficient. They were lazy and turned their attention to me. I don't know what they did to brainwash Mary, but she started treating Joey as if he were her own child. Joey always got the best food, the best toys, and even blew out Alice's birthday candles first. If there was a fight, it was always Alice's fault. If Joey was upset, he took it out on Alice's toys. Thankfully, Alice was understanding. With my constant guidance, she grew up cheerful and healthy. I took the keys from the landlord and led Alice to our new home. As the door opened, Alice jumped with joy. Dad, is this really just ours? Can I jump around? Can I sing loudly? Can I put my drawings on the wall without anyone tearing them down? I nodded, tears mixed with my smile. My little Alice, my sweet, adorable Alice, finally didn't have to live under someone else's rules. After settling in, I applied for a job transfer at work, moving from handling customer complaints to a sales position. I wanted to give Alice and myself a better future, to earn more money. In the 2 months since we moved out, Mary hadn't visited us once. I knew she was sulking, betting that I would eventually come back. During those quiet nights, I often reflected on our marriage and Mary's role in it. She had given me initial warmth and a sense of belonging, and provided Alice with a basic mother figure. But beyond that, there was nothing, just coldness and disappointment. She never offered me a word of comfort when I was exhausted, nor did she ever hold Alice when she had nightmares. Instead, she mimicked her mother, accusing me of not contributing enough to the household. When I did my best, they scolded me for meddling too much, calling me an outsider. Every penny I earned was spent generously on her family, while Alice and I got the leftover, out-of-season clothes. She was like a needle deeply embedded in me, draining my lifeblood to sustain her family. After years of numbness, I finally woke up in pain. Now, I wanted to pull that needle out. I began to think about how to bring up the topic of divorce with Mary. But before I could, she called me first. Her voice was frantic and panicked. Get to the hospital, quick. Bring as much money as you can. I was about to take Alice to the zoo. Hearing the urgency in her voice, I left Alice with the landlord downstairs and rushed to the hospital. When I found Mary, She was pacing anxiously at the entrance. I called out to her, and she ran to me like I was her lifeline. What happened? Who's in the hospital? I asked. She looked at me nervously and said, Joey was at the mall and made fun of a pregnant woman for walking funny because of her big belly. She got angry and said something to him, and he kicked her in the stomach. She's in surgery now, bleeding heavily. My mind went blank. This was beyond terrible. This was criminal. Where's Joey? Where are your parents? Why are you here alone? And where are the pregnant woman's family? My mom took Joey and hid him, afraid the woman's family would hurt him. My dad told me to call you to negotiate compensation. I punched the pillar next to me in frustration, cursing under my breath. At a time like this, you're thinking about hiding? The most important thing now is to have that brat beg for forgiveness. How many times does he have to mess up before you realize the seriousness of his actions? This is a crime. Mary, overwhelmed, started crying, drawing the attention of passers-by. I ignored her and ran towards the operating room. A crowd had gathered outside. I pushed through and saw Mary's dad kneeling, tearfully begging the pregnant woman's family for forgiveness. A man, presumably the woman's husband, kicked Mary's dad in the chest. You better pray my wife and baby are okay, or your family is finished, he threatened, ready to kick again but was held back by others, who warned him not to escalate the situation. Knowing this wasn't the time to discuss compensation, I helped Mary's dad to a nearby bench, sitting with him to wait for news from the operating room. I sighed and pulled out my phone to call the landlord, explaining the situation and asking her to look after Alice for the night. She agreed without hesitation, reassuring me to take care of what I needed to and not to worry about Alice. A wave of gratitude washed over me, and I thanked her sincerely. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity for everyone waiting outside the operating room. Finally, the light above the door went out, and the door opened. The pregnant woman's family rushed to the entrance. The mother and baby are safe. It's a boy, but he was born prematurely and needs to be taken to the neonatal unit immediately. A family member needs to sign some papers, the doctor said. The crowd let out a collective sigh of relief. The pregnant woman's mother clasped her hands together, tears in her eyes. I exhaled deeply, feeling a weight lift off my chest. Next came the discussion about compensation. The amount was substantial, and neither side was willing to compromise. Eventually, we hired lawyers, and the court ruled that we had to cover all medical expenses for both the mother and baby during their hospital stay, plus $100,000 in damages. Mary and her father grumbled all the way home, only to find that Mary's mother had already returned with Joey. Mary's father, his earlier anger forgotten, hugged Joey and looked him over. You've had a tough time these past few days. Let's have your sister make you something good to eat. I wanted to suggest that they use this incident to teach Joey a lesson, but I knew they wouldn't. Besides, I was about to sever all ties with them. No point in leaving on a sour note. While Mary was busy in the kitchen, I formally brought up the topic of divorce. This family was too toxic, and I couldn't bear to be associated with them any longer. Mary seemed to think she had misheard me and kept asking me to repeat myself. Mary, I want a divorce, I said again. This time, she understood. Her face darkened, and she grabbed a frying pan, swinging it at my head. Divorce? You eat our food, live in our house, and now you want a divorce? You've grown bold after just 2 days away. I caught the frying pan and said firmly, this divorce is happening. If you don't agree, we'll settle it in court. I pushed past her and walked out, ignoring the shocked faces of her parents and Joey. As I left, I heard Mary's father shouting, we can't let him leave. Who will support us if he goes? Mary, go after him. I scoffed internally. True to form, Mary showed up at my door that very evening, following her mother's orders. I blocked her from entering. She pulled out a hair clip from her bag and called out, Alice, Mommy's here. I brought you a pretty hair clip. Come and see. Alice, who was drawing in the living room, didn't even turn around. Mary's face fell. You're poisoning Alice against me. I sneered. You know you're her mother? How many times have you held her? Go back to the family that needs you. We don't. I slammed the door in her face. After a moment, I noticed Alice's shoulders shaking. I rushed over, and she turned to me, her face wet with tears. She understood everything. Alice's tears strengthened my resolve to get a divorce. I filed the papers as quickly as possible. However, during the first court hearing, Mary's tearful, seemingly genuine remorse swayed the judge, and the divorce was not granted. I would have to wait 6 months to file again. I felt disheartened. I arranged to meet David for a drink. He He was my colleague at my first job in this city, and although he later started his own company, our friendship remained strong. After a few drinks, David noticed something was off with me. He pressed me until I finally opened up about my situation. "I have to get this divorce," I said. "If I don't, I'll be cleaning up after that family forever." David asked, "Why won't she agree to the divorce? Is she still holding on to old feelings?" I scoffed. "It's not about feelings. They're all leeches. Without me, who else would support them?" David nodded thoughtfully. "So it's about money, huh? Give me the address of your in-laws' rental property. I have an idea. Within a month, she'll be begging you for a divorce." I pressed him for details, but he just smiled and said it would be a surprise. I didn't expect Mary to come to me so quickly about the divorce. She walked in, all high and mighty, and threw a piece of paper in front of me. "You want a divorce? Sign this and it's done. The sooner, the better." I picked up the paper. It was a divorce agreement stating that I would get custody of Alice, our savings, and the car, but I couldn't touch the rental property under her name. I chuckled and signed it without hesitation. She grabbed the agreement and rushed out the door. I followed her and saw her get into a red BMW, which sped away. The driver looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. Before I could think further, David called, "Did you get the divorce?" I looked at the agreement in my hand. "Yes." "Great. Let's celebrate tonight. You can thank the mastermind behind it all." I was puzzled. Mastermind? Before I could ask more, a message from Mary came in. I told David I'd call him back. Mary's message read, "Since we're divorced, let's cut all ties. Come by this afternoon and clear out your and Alice's things. Don't delay." Her urgency made me even more curious about what David had done to make her agree so quickly. I picked up Alice from school and headed to the house to move our things. I brought Alice along because she had many toys there that she loved and couldn't take with us during the rushed move last time. To speed things up, I called David to help. When we arrived, Mary's parents didn't greet us warmly. But when Mary's dad saw David, his eyes lit up. "You look familiar, young man," he said. David laughed. "I have one of those faces." I led Alice around the house, while Mary's mom told Joey, who was playing video games, to watch us and make sure we didn't take his toys. Joey immediately put down his computer and followed Alice, grabbing anything she reached for and glaring at her. I sighed and told Alice, "Just take the things that mean the most to you. I can buy you new ones for everything else." Alice nodded and her eyes fell on the keyboard in the corner. It was a prize she had won in a competition and cherished deeply. Determined, she ran over and picked it up. Joey, realizing too late, dropped his other toys and rushed to grab it from her. I had enough. I stepped in front of Alice, blocking Joey. He hesitated, fear flashing in his eyes. Since the last time I had disciplined him, he had developed a healthy fear of me. I spoke to Joey as calmly as I could. "Let Alice take this one. You can keep everything else." Joey looked at me, then at Alice, and finally backed down. He knew better than to challenge me again. Joey glared at me with pure hatred, then ran to his grandfather, barking orders. "Go get it back for me. Now. It's mine. Everything is mine. She can't take anything." He pushed and shoved Mary's mom, who initially tried to coax Alice into putting the keyboard down. When that didn't work, she lost her patience and started yelling at Alice. "You troublesome girl. Why do you have to fight over everything? No wonder your mom doesn't like you." Alice's eyes filled with fear, and she hid behind me, clutching the keyboard tightly. I took her small hand and said, "Hold on to your keyboard. We're going home." But before we could take a step, a loud crash echoed through the room, startling even me. I turned to see Joey smashing things with a baseball bat. The first crash had come from the glass coffee table, now shattered. He swung the bat wildly, screaming, "I'll show you. I'll break everything if you don't listen to me." His next swing dented the refrigerator door, and then he smashed the fish tank on the dining table. Water and glass shards spilled everywhere, and the goldfish flopped helplessly on the floor. Mary's mom screamed and lunged at Joey, trying to restrain him, but she underestimated the strength of an enraged 10-year-old. She stumbled and fell, ending up on her knees, gripping Joey's arm. Mary's dad seized the opportunity to grab the bat from Joey's hands. Joey, now immobilized, screamed even louder, pointing at Alice and me. "Put it down. If you don't, I'll destroy this whole house, and you'll have to pay for it." Mary's mom, now desperate, cried out, "Stop. If you break it, we'll have to buy new ones. Stop it. I'll buy you whatever you want." I held the sobbing Alice close and signaled David to keep moving. We didn't stop until we were downstairs. Alice finally calmed down, and I was about to say something to comfort her when I heard shouting from above. I looked up instinctively and saw Joey leaning out of a window, searching for us. His eyes locked onto us, and he lifted something heavy. Before I could react, he hurled it down. I pulled Alice back, stepping on someone's foot in the process. I wanted to shout a warning, but it was too late. The object, a broken fish tank, smashed into a girl walking by. She collapsed in front of me, the glass and water mixing with the bodies of the goldfish. 10 days after the incident, Mary came to see me. She looked exhausted, her voice hoarse. I sold my mom's house, but it's not enough. The girl's medical bills are too high. I need to borrow $200,000. I'll pay you back as soon as I sell the other rental property. You sold the other house? I asked, surprised. She looked startled, realizing she had said too much, and gave me an awkward smile. I had no interest in delving further. It was no longer my concern. Mary, I'm sorry, but I can't help you. Last time, when your brother pushed that woman down the stairs, the medical bills and compensation totaled nearly $300,000, all from my account. You know how much I have left. That's why you were so generous during the divorce, right? Mary's face twisted with anger and shame. She said nothing more and left. I watched her go, sighed, and arranged to meet David for a drink. I still hadn't thanked him properly. David arrived with another man, slightly shorter and bearing a resemblance to him. David introduced him. Meet my cousin. You owe your divorce to him. I looked at the man, suddenly recognizing him. You were the one driving the red BMW that picked up Mary that day. He smiled. Glad to be at your service, sir. As we sat down, David's cousin said, I really admire you. I couldn't stand living with that family for 2 months. I can't imagine how you did it for over 10 years. They treated me like a handyman, fixing everything from clogged drains to broken lights. I laughed. They were testing you as a potential new son-in-law. Don't even joke about it. My back is killing me from all the work. If you hadn't divorced, I might have ended up with a slip disc. David laughed and playfully smacked his cousin's head. Serves you right for slacking off. You were the only one available, so you got the job. We all laughed, the tension of the past few months finally easing. I raised my glass and looked at the 2 men who had been bantering. Words can't express my gratitude. You guys saved me from a living hell. Otherwise, I'd be nothing but bones by now. David lifted his glass, but before taking a sip, he put it down and sighed deeply. It's a shame about that young girl. I wonder if she'll ever wake up. That kid is a little demon. He took a drink and then suddenly changed the subject. Aren't you curious how we got Mary to agree to the divorce so willingly? I said I wasn't curious, but I had already figured it out. Yeah, when Mary came to borrow money today and accidentally mentioned selling the house, I had a pretty good idea. She loves money, and with a charming new guy showering her with attention, she probably forgot all about me. David, you orchestrated a chance meeting between your cousin and Mary through a minor traffic accident. They exchanged WeChat contacts and kept in touch. Your cousin filled the void I left, and then he mentioned knowing someone willing to pay a high price for her rental property. Mary, seeing a future filled with wealth and a more attentive man, couldn't wait to divorce me and cash in. But in the end, she fell into your trap. As we drank, the bar filled up with more patrons, and the conversations around us grew louder. At a nearby table, 2 middle-aged men were talking animatedly, slapping the table in anger. That family is unbelievable. After causing such a big incident, they ran off with that brat. It's inhuman. They really ran? Yeah, the parents took the kid and fled in the middle of the night. Their daughter tried to leave the next day but got caught. Now they're selling the house and scraping together money for the girl's medical bills. It's a tragedy. Kids these days are terrifying, but it's the parents' fault. If they don't take responsibility, the kids run wild. I thought for a moment, then downed my last drink. I pulled out my phone and transferred $50,000 to Mary. Not for her, but for the innocent girl lying in the ICU, caught in this senseless disaster. This is the end of the story. Kindly leave your thoughts in the comments and let us know how you feel about the story.